Hello, this is Antonio Bruni. I'm an attorney with Michles and Booth. We have offices in Pensacola, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and Crestview, Florida. I'm here to talk to you today about disability benefit programs and specifically permanent and total disability under the Florida Workers' Compensation System and Social Security disability, and that includes supplemental security income disability under the Social Security Act. So there's a lot, those two benefit programs can be used in combination with each other or completely separate. And there's a lot of questions that come up on those two programs about how they're similar, how they're different, and whether or not they can be used together. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And with that in mind, we'll get right into it. So the difference between workers' compensation, Social Security, disability is just basically Florida workers' compensation is state law. Social Security disability is federal law. Florida workers' compensation is for people who have been injured on the job in the state of Florida, whereas Social Security disability is for people that have suffered injuries or not even necessarily injuries, that have just developed medical conditions that prohibit them from performing what Social Security refers to as substantial gainful activity, which basically means full-time work for at least a 12-month period. So both are permanent disability programs, and that is they do not cover short-term. Workers' compensation does have a short-term disability program that covers anywhere from 2 up to 5 years of lost wages, and then there becomes a permanent component, and that's if you just can't go back to work at all. Social Security has nothing for short term. So if you just can't work for a period of up to 1 year, if you're off work for a serious car accident or you have a serious fracture, you break your leg really bad and you can't work for 6 months, there's nothing from the Social Security Administration they can do to help you. You have to be off work for at least 1 full year, 12 full calendar months for the Social Security disability program to kick in. So that's really the biggest difference, work comp being state, Social Security being federal. Work comp does have a short-term component. Social Security has no short-term component. Social Security is only long-term, lasting at least 1 year. So how do you get work comp and Social Security disability? Well, the first way with both is you can automatically be accepted based on the severity of your condition. Workers' compensation has what's called catastrophic injuries, and just an example of some of those, work comp has paralysis, amputation of an arm, hand, or foot, severe brain or closed head injury, second or third degree burns over 25% or more of your body, or total industrial blindness. So just for some examples, and then you can get into debating whether or not you meet the specific criteria for one of those. But work comp has a set of those catastrophic injuries, and if you have one of those, they automatically accept you. They don't get into whether or not you could do what you used to do, or if there's other jobs you can do. They just say, look, if your accident has blinded you, if your accident has amputated your arm, it doesn't matter if you could still do your old job with one arm. You're disabled. Social Security has what's called the listing of impairments, and it's very similar. It's much more exhaustive than that, but Social Security has, it's well over 100 very specific medical conditions that you can have, and you can look them up online. They're called the Social Security listing of impairments, and you just go through, and they have them for your musculoskeletal system, which is, for example, if you have a bad back or herniated disc in your back. They have special senses in speech, which is issues with like if you've lost speech or vision. Respiratory disorders, people with COPD, cardiovascular system, people with heart disease, digestive system, blood disorders, skin disorders, congenital disorders, neurological disorders, mental disorders, so someone who has mental health issues, they have specific listings that you can meet. Cancer is in there, immune system disorders. So in each one of those, there's several underneath it where they list specific medical conditions that you can have. And if you have one of those medical conditions, Social Security will automatically pick you up. If you don't, in both work comp and Social Security, if you don't have one of their specific severe conditions, you can still move on to the second part, which is what's called vocationally disabled. And in workers' compensation, what they do is they say uh, you must not be able to engage in at least sedentary employment within a 50-mile radius of the employee's residence due to his or her physical limitation. So right there, Florida Work Comp says two things. You have to be reduced to at least sedentary work, and then you have to be able to find a sedentary job within 50 miles of your house. So if you live way out, far away from Pensacola or Fort Walton or Crestview, if you live way up by the the Alabama line, you may be more than 50 miles away from any cluster of jobs. You would have a much higher chance of getting work comp permanent total disability because there's no jobs within 50 miles of your house. And the other thing they're looking for is what I have here is called real jobs. Is there actually has to be someone hiring. If no one's hiring and you have sedentary work restrictions and there's no jobs available within 50 miles of your house, then you're permanently disabled. And that's one of the ways you can prove it is you do a work search. If you go through and you've been looking for work for 6 months and you can't find anything because nobody can hire you because you've been told by your doctor you can't lift more than 10 or 15 pounds, then you've got a real good permanent disability claim. In Social Security, what they're looking at is national jobs. And they don't have a specific uh, area that they're looking at. So if you look in Pensacola, they can say, we understand that no one's hiring in Pensacola, but we're looking at potential jobs. All that matters for Social Security is that a job has to exist anywhere in the country that you could still do with your limitations. So for example, they could say there is, and this is one they use all the time, there's surveillance system monitor. And you say, well, I live in Chumuckla and there are no surveillance system monitor jobs in Chumuckla, Florida. Well, there are in Arkansas or there are in Washington State, and there's plenty of them. You're not disabled because you could still do that surveillance system monitor job where you're just watching a screen and picking up the phone and calling the police. You've got 2 bad feet or you broke a leg real bad, but so you can't be on your feet all day, but you can still watch a screen. And the Social Security Administration will tell you, look, there's still a job that exists somewhere in the country that you can do with your injury. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. Work comp has a more practical approach. Social Security is a more theoretical, and they knock a lot of people out. Social Security does by saying that, there's jobs somewhere that you could still do. The last thing I wanted to address was, can you file for Social Security disability after a workers' compensation claim? And the answer is absolutely yes. They are not mutually exclusive, which means that you can have both. Workers' compensation does get an offset for any payments that you receive for Social Security disability. If workers' compensation does not take the offset and you apply for Social Security disability after you have settled your workers' compensation claim, Social Security disability will take the offset. So one of the two is going to try to take an offset against the other, but you can absolutely file for Social Security disability, permanent disability, after you've gotten workers' compensation disability. And what you should know is just because you were unsuccessful with one, because they have different standards, it does not mean you will be unsuccessful with the other. In the same logic, if you were successful with one, it does not mean you will be successful in the other. Workers' compensation could say there's no surveillance system monitors within 50 miles of Chumuckla, and then the Social Security judge says, yeah, but there's thousands of surveillance system monitors nationwide. Just because there's not within 50 miles of where you live doesn't mean I'm giving you disability. And so you could have the exact same set of facts, the exact same restrictions, and be denied Social Security disability and accepted for workers' compensation permanent disability. So just keep that in mind. You can file for both, and that's one of the reasons you should definitely, if you have any questions about that, give us a call at Michles and Booth. We have, doesn't cost anything to talk to us, so free, no obligation consultation. Call me. My name's Antonio, and just tell me you want to talk to the Social Security attorney or workers' compensation about permanent disability, and they'll get you right to me. Any other questions, you can find us online at www.michelsbooth.com. Y'all have a great day.